Thank you. I now call this meeting of the Committee of the Whole to order at 5:31 p.m. I'll have the coordinator call the roll.
Mr. Dixon?
Here.
Mr. Rollins?
Here.
Mr. Scrivano?
Here.
Mrs. McCulloch? Mr. Siegel?
Here.
Mr. Connor?
Here.
Ms. Stanford?
Here.
With 7 present, we have a quorum.
Thank you. I'd like to thank Connor, who's working in the backgrounds behind the wall over here to make us look good on TV and Channel 20. So thank you, Connor, for your help. I just want to remind board members that we, during presentations, we're holding our questions until the presentation is over. I'd ask you to speak loudly and clearly into your microphones since we're all wearing masks. And we've got these plexiglass dividers, so thank you for that. Have the coordinator call the roll. We did that, right? Yeah. Okay, so the first thing we have to do is the minutes of August 4th. Are there any changes or corrections or additions to the meeting minutes of August 4th? If not, is there a consensus to approve those minutes? Good. Okay, so those will August 4th minutes will be approved. We're now on to new business, and Dr. Heather Saltis is doing our first presentation on Thurgood Marshall, math resource. So could you turn the microphone on and speak loud?
All right, with the mask, can you hear me? So I do want to mention, though, too, it is also the 60th birthday of Auburn High School, and I'm an Auburn Knight today, 60 years ago, so once a night, always a night. So tonight, it's not a presentation, it's a Tier 1 PDSA with your new structure, but we're proposing the purchase of a new textbook, or a new resource that includes a textbook and digital license for the math curriculum at Marshall. And in the executive summary, all the details are there. I don't know how much detail without a slide deck you'd like me to go into, but I'm certainly happy to take questions.
Comments or questions? The cost is?
It's $42,138.60, and then it
Okay.
would be at the next board meeting for a vote.
Any comments or questions for Heather? Seeing none, this will come back to us at our next board meeting for approval then, right? Yeah, on
Thank you.
the 8th of September, next Tuesday.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Yar, you're up next with the resolution to adopt the 2021 budget.
Okay, you might recall that we brought this forward in May, so I did the presentation before, so I'm gonna hit some highlights tonight. Really, we ended up right at the same spot that I presented as one of the options in May. Of course, you know, we're still in the middle of this pandemic. So it's really a story about the revenue and not about the expense side of things. We did get the CARES Act money for the expense side. The revenue came in flat for evidence-based funding. I communicated that out in a board update that was flat. So with that flat evidence-based funding, that put us in a deficit for the year, fiscal year 21 at $9.3 million. So here's this slide, which really just shows the evidence-based funding, how it is flat now. We know that. That's received that notification. Same exact revenue for property taxes. One thing I wanted to point out here is the property tax rate. So you can see now that the tax rate, the benefit of really bringing this forward now is we have knowns. They're not assumptions any longer. A lot of these are knowns. But our property tax rate, if we still hold it flat, is now at 6.54. So that's really dropped considerably. That is due to the EAV going up again. And then the tax rate, we also had a bond that was paid off, so that helps with the tax rate as well. $19.9 million is CPPRT. That is our estimate that we received from the state now. I originally proposed this at $19.1 million in May, so we're just off $800,000 on that. We really get this trued up at the end of the year, so we'll see how it really lands, but that is the estimate from Illinois Department of Revenue. Interest rates are still where we said they were before, so I just updated the slide just to put a note that it's still at the 25 basis points for the Fed rate. Still really, really low. And then the revenues and expenditures are showing a net decrease of $9 million. I'll click over to the next slide. So you can see the overall picture of the operating funds, $384 million in revenue, $393 million in expenditures, a reserve spent at $9.3 million. There's been a lot of changes from the last, few months that we've made, but we've actually been able to offset those. So we were able to see what our vacancies really are today. Our budgets were really close to that. We were able to save some money with leases because we were able to claim that on our CARES Act money. So we're able to pay off some of our technology leases. And this just really shows the picture of the 2 years. So this is the goal, was to really have the 2 years offset one another. So you can see the fiscal year 20, we expect to land at $9.6 million. That is still a projection. We're still finalizing it, but we're really close to finalizing the year end. Those will be audited, and then we'll have a true updated number at that point, but we expect it to be very close to that. And then you can see between the 2 years, if we could offset that and just keep it flat, I think that's a really good goal considering this pandemic that we're in and just really the fluid situation. And that still gives us a fund balance. Our fund balance position is still really good, and so we're at 39% fund balance, and our goal is 25%. That is our policy. And then we just really enhance the presentation a little bit, so it's a little bit easier to see all the non-operating funds as well. Multi-year projections, I worked on this as my OKR for this last year. We don't have all of it in yet, but we have most of it. So what we did was I asked all the departments to give me their 5-year plan of what they needed to replace, like vehicles, technology, those types of things. So I baked those into these multi-year projections. They haven't always been very meaningful because I didn't have that piece. But now we have most of it, and we're just waiting for that facilities condition assessment to come in, and then I'll incorporate that in the multi-year projections. This will tell us how much we need to go out for bonds on in order to do our next facilities master plan, and really just to keep things current and in good working condition going forward. So we're bringing this forward. As I said, we could have passed it in June. We would have been at the same spot, but of course we didn't know that at that time. But now we know that the $9.3 million reserve spend is where we will land. We're going to work really hard over the next few months to see where else we could have some cost savings. And of course, there's added expenditures, but really, like I said in the beginning, it's really a story of the revenue taking a very big dive. So this will come for final approval the second meeting of September. Any questions on this?
Comments or questions for Michelle? Mr. Rollins.
I guess my only comment is I've never really been in favor of deficit budgets, but we have a healthy fund balance. We've got which you can look at as a rainy day fund, and
Right.
There's no point in having a rainy day fund if you don't use it when there's a rainy day, and this is a rainy day. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
I would appreciate, your ongoing work in trying to reduce that, and certainly we'll need to be careful that that doesn't become standard going forward.
Oh,
I mean,
right.
if this continues, we may, have to look at some different things.
Absolutely.
So my I guess is a comment for me. We're going to use $9.3 million from reserves, and that will still be above the target of the 25%.
Yes.
Would it be your plan that we would replenish that $9.3 million over time to put that back into reserves, or not necessarily do that? Kind of depends.
I think it depends, because we've bumped that up on things that we didn't want to bump it up on. So vacancies, for instance, we end up getting extra income, basically, a net increase, but we don't want these vacancies because we really need teachers and we need staff. So that's been the history the last couple of years, is we've added to fund balance. So, but we've added in a way that we didn't really want to. I mean, we didn't want to have those savings for teacher vacancies. We needed those positions. So we will have some of that, I'm sure, still going forward. We're still going to have the same problems going forward that will add to it. But I wouldn't want us to have 2 years of a deficit spend.
Yeah.
I feel pretty comfortable to have it offset one another, that we're still in the same spot really on a 2-year, looking at a 2-year picture. But going forward, we really need to monitor this, and we do, to make sure that.
I guess my worry a little bit is that, this is being driven, as you said, by decreased revenue.
Yep.
And, what if that, that continues for another year beyond, into 2022?
Yeah.
Then, we'll be in the same boat next year with our budgeting.
We're definitely looking at that. I mean, now we've kicked off fiscal year 22 budget as well, so we're looking at that already and starting that. So we have 2 budget cycles going on at once. But we will make adjustments so we can prevent that from happening in that second year.
Okay. Mr. Siegel?
I had a number of emails over the last few weeks from people expressing a great deal of concern for our budget, and largely as to what sort of a refund they were going to get from their property taxes for schools having been closed in the spring and likely this coming year. And I think that this is I hope they're watching and really continuing to pay attention, because I think this is a great explanation as to why such a refund isn't coming. that the expenses still continue. We have so many fixed costs with wages and benefits and being able to acquire technology, deliver curriculum, et cetera. Yet we don't get to just keep acquiring more money easily in order to cover those additional expenses and those fixed costs. And we're now also seeing that the revenues that we were anticipating aren't going to be there, and this is going to be a really difficult time. So I hope that those who have been expressing their interest continue to show their interest and are monitoring this narrative, because it is one that does explain a lot as to why they're not seeing a change in their property tax. But not seeing a change in the property tax is kind of the good news. The fact that for 9 consecutive years we have not raised the levy has what has allowed us to bring that rate down to a really great level. But clearly, whether this continues or not, it is going to be it'll continue to be harder to keep doing more without taking more. So, but I don't know. I was pleased to see this. I mean, I was fearing it was going to be far worse than, taking $9 million out of reserves. So I'm pretty happy with this.
Mr. Connor.
Yeah, before I get into the things I was going to say, let me just add to what Mr. Siegel said. I'd like everyone in the district to ask themselves what governing body today has the same tax rate that they had 9 years ago. Go ahead and name them. Oh, wait. Ooh, there are none. So let me just say that. And also the fact that that our tax rate has been going down, and that's the equivalent to 9 years ago. Anyway, mine is more on the new request, slide 27. So that is for 2021. Do you anticipate, if you started to talk about some of those new requests for the following year? So for example, the big item there is the Chromebooks. Will we see a repeat of that? Will we have a lot of replacements? Is there something else that's a big ticket item on the IT side that we should anticipate for the next budget year?
Both, actually. So the $1.4 million for the Chromebooks, that is, I know it's been a long time now, but that is our pre-funding of our lease payments, how we used to lease and now we're not. So this is to make sure that at the end of 3 or 4 years, whatever the life is of that device, we will have enough money to buy more Chromebooks. So instead of paying interest and now it's very low, but instead of doing that, we are putting money aside for that every single year. It was initially a lease, but we were able to then purchase, but we still want to set that money aside.
Yeah, I remember actually, since you said that, the discussion. Okay, so essentially we'll have roughly that same amount then for the following year is kind of the deal. Okay.
Yeah, and I put that in that multi-year spending plan. It's really hard to do one budget at a time when someone might say, oh, we need, X million this year. You can't really plan for that. So it's much better to plan 5 years and then have all of those. You're going to miss some things, but we're going to get the bulk of it.
I think the point would be that the district is thinking ahead. It's a one-for-one, using the term that a lot of people know, which means that every student has a device. And that is the important factor, is we've committed that over the long haul. So whether it's remote in a year or not, the students will still have the availability of the technology. And that's, from my point of view, a really important commitment.
Yeah, it's really important to have a funding strategy going forward to replace these devices. There's not 3 or 4 years is not that long.
Yep.
Since we're on that slide, I guess maybe Dr. Vosberg, can you talk a little bit about the costs associated with the NIU? When we have approved that plan, and I was there for the presentation, as you know. So, but I just wanted, if you could hit the highlights of, we're going to pay for some residents to be in AP positions and stuff like that, right?
The dollar amount you see there reflects 3 salaries, basically an extra assistant principal, 1 at elementary school, 1 at middle school, 1 at high school. and then the tuition for this year for the 20 cohort members, and then the coaching from IPA.
Okay, good. Any other questions or comments for Michelle? Seeing none, we'll vote on this on September 8th as well. Okay. Next is Tooling U, Mrs. French.
Hello, Bridget French, Executive Director of College and Career Readiness. The CCR team is looking for $30,000 for a virtual platform called Tooling U. It supports remote and hybrid instruction for our high school students in the Production Academy. Specifically 6 classes: Intro to Production, Orientation to Manufacturing, Orientation to Transportation, Machine Tool Technology, Transportation, and Fabrication. So we've had difficulty finding virtual resources for these courses, and this was recommended to us by one of our fabrication teachers. We looked at it. We actually consulted with some community partners as well in the manufacturing industry, and this was highly rated by many community partners, and then the teacher who piloted it this past spring as well. So we are looking for funding to support this virtual platform for our teachers. Any questions?
Mr. Connor.
Being a longtime supporter of what used to be called vocational, I know it's career, call it what you will, but what a great program, and it's very exciting. I talked to a lot of local manufacturers, and one of the things that we're doing is we are making it very accessible for all our students, and I'm on the page on machining, and if you look at it, it's got about CNC control, and I mean, it's really what I would say very practically oriented. I looked through this, and it's very impressive. Good foundational skills. One of the trends that we've got is that we've got students who are going out and being apprentices in the manufacturing and production world, and this will really strengthen that. So this, from my point of view, I'm way in favor of this because it will give access to many more students, and so and the foundation is really good for people in those production type businesses, so way in favor of this.
Thank you.
Mr. Siegel, there we go. I turned my
Thank
mic
you.
on. Okay.
Do we have a sense yet of how many students are going to engage with this particular catalog of classes? And I don't know if it's known a breakdown by school.
I don't have the breakdown by school with me. I can definitely get that to you.
Cool.
But throughout the district, our 5 high schools, including Roosevelt, we have 47 sections of these 6 classes, and typically, you know, we would have anywhere between 28 and 30 students in a section or a class. So it's a significant number of students.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Dixon, did you have your line on? Yeah.
Yes, I really don't have a question, just really a comment. I really want to say that this program that we're looking at is wonderful because it gives the opportunity for kids to connect school to the workplace. Other than that, they ask, why do I have to learn math? Or why do I have to learn this? And this gives them an opportunity to see it active and being put out in an environment. So I commend this program, especially all the programs that we have. It's like you said, we have apprenticeships, we have different avenues that our students could learn and develop from this. So you always have my support in this.
Great. Any others? If not, this will come back to us next week for our approval. Thank you, Bridget. Our next item is a report on the discussion of the new committee structure. Dr. Jarrett.
Thank you. If I can ask everyone to pull up the attachment that says Cabinet to Board Monthly Plan 2021 and follow along there. I think that'll help us with our discussion. Really appreciative that the board passed our new committee structure. and looking forward to having a conversation tonight that I hope makes this a little more tangible. So what I took the liberty of doing here is laying out basically on a month-by-month basis what this will look like. I will spare the board of the agony of going through every single month. I thought we would focus on the first month, and then we can extrapolate from there and have what I hope is a really good conversation about how this would work over the rest of the year. What I started with is the October 6th Committee of the Whole meeting, which we are rapidly starting the preparation process for now. And I think that's one of the big changes that we're going to see is as the board committee chairs and the chief staff liaisons work together, we're going to be thinking a month or two in advance and kind of getting way out in front. So working backwards from October 6th, we have our first deadline this month on Friday. The chief staff liaisons, so in this case that's Lori for governance, Michelle for planning, Heidi for performance monitoring, and Earl for our for our internal and external stakeholder communications. Those four are tasked with submitting a draft agenda to cabinet by this Friday. So this is happening. We have to get going immediately here. And their job is to organize their items into action items and informational items. On September 8th, then the cabinet meets the first, and it'll be the first Monday of the month. Now in this case, it's the second Monday of the month, admittedly. But moving forward, it'll be the first Monday of the month. The cabinet will meet, and Doug Eady, the person who we worked with, refers to that as the cabinet essentially becomes what's called the Governance Coordinating Committee. And the cabinet, which is something we do typically now as well, takes those ideas from the committee chairs and reviews the committee as a whole. And this is a way to make sure all of the departments in the district are represented in this conversation on the front end. Then each chief staff liaison has a maximum of 2 weeks, and probably the sooner the better, but 2 weeks depending on schedules, to meet with the board committee chairs, and those were named at our meeting last week. And it's about, at that point, securing buy-in and ensuring understanding, because now the responsibility, this is a very different model. Now instead of staff just presenting this work, our board committee chairs are going to not only be leading the committee on board night, but they are going to have the responsibility, they're going to very much be part of presenting and sharing this information moving forward. So there's a different level of board ownership on the front end for those committee chairs. So admittedly, this is more responsibility. Then come October 1st, we are going to have what is called the Governance Committee, and this is what we call board planning right now. Right now, the Thursday before every board meeting, Ken, at times another board member, Lori Holdley, and I currently meet to review the board agenda the Thursday before the Tuesday meeting. We do that before every meeting, whether it's the committee of the whole. What we're going to be doing differently now, Ken and I just talked about this today, and one of the things we can discuss tonight, but we thought one of the ways to do that work may be to have Ken and Lori and I meet to cover the governance portion first, and then we could rotate in staff liaisons and committee chairs over the next in 15-minute increments or so to review the agenda. That's one possibility that we could do, so that we could have separate small group planning sessions. Then the actual meeting occurs. So I have that in bold, October 6th. You can see that we have that. And a big difference with these committee meetings is that every single topic is going to be previewed for the whole month of board meetings at that meeting. Everything runs through the committee structure. Now, that doesn't mean we're going to be discussing everything on that committee of the whole meeting, but the board is going to get a preview that night, some of which are placeholders, things like student discipline, obviously we wouldn't know about in advance. Some things like our HR report, we wouldn't know everything in advance, but there will be a few exceptions that'll be placeholders, but largely the items that we are going to see throughout the month are going to be previewed and flow through those three committees. Essentially everything that we could talk about could flow through one of those three committees. And if you remember our conversation again, planning is really about things that are going to happen in the future. Okay? And then our performance monitoring is about reviewing things that have happened. So it's kind of forward and backwards there, kind of. And then the external stakeholder communications is all about how we are interacting with our internal community as well as our external stakeholders. And really, those three categories are broad enough where we can fit everything through that. What it doesn't fit are obviously going to be the governance topics, which Lori Holdley will be bringing to the table. That'll be things like board policy changes. So between those four committees, everything will be previewed through that committee of the whole. Then, following that meeting, you would have the governance committee meeting again to prep for the new board meeting number 1. Because we'll take those topics and we'll share those over the course of 2 meetings. I would think in most months, the October 13th meeting will be probably heavier because it'll be more timely to approve things at that meeting. So that board meeting number 1 will typically probably have some more things up for approval. But we will also spread that into the October 27th meeting, and you can see there continue to be governance committee meetings. And I didn't continue this through the whole time, but Cabinet will also continue to meet to prepare for those meetings as well to make sure we're doing a good job of supporting the board. So you can see how that will work. The second piece that I wanted to share with you is we are going to really transform the weekly board update. We do some of this now, but really the weekly board update increasingly will be about previewing things that are coming up for the committee of the whole meeting, reviewing the conversation that happens at board meetings, and then just kind of a review preview cycle. It will not be review in the sense that it'll just be meeting minutes. You already get meeting minutes. It'll be more capturing the flavor of some of the conversation or highlighting some high-level changes that are made or providing some in-depth information that was requested during the board discussion. So that weekly update will cover some things maybe we don't have time to discuss, because we always have time limits. We're always up against the clock in board meetings. We have lots to cover in a typical month. But it also will allow us to preview things to get a head start in understanding them before we have our discussion as well. Because obviously the committee leads will have more information. And again, I'm going to be helping the committee chairs, staff liaisons will be working with Mary and I to help populate those weekly updates with preview and review information. Now, the last thing I want to share with you, if you just slide into the second page and just note, this is probably, I think, what the staff and I thought was the most challenging part of this model, and that is as you slide into November 3rd, the committee of the whole meeting, and the November 10th and 24th meeting, you'll notice that by October 2nd and 5th, at the same time that we're getting ready to have our October 6th committee of the whole meeting, we're simultaneously getting ready to have our big meeting, that committee meeting, and at the same time already having to be thinking about November. So that is a bit of a bottleneck, and it's going to take a little bit getting used to. We think our chief staff liaisons will be up to the task of assisting with that, but that is going to be a lot to keep track of because we will be looking a month ahead for our big topics while simultaneously getting ready to actually present on the topics that we've been spending a month preparing for at the same time. So you kind of have that tough week 1 situation there. And so to me, admittedly, that may be one of the biggest challenges in this particular model. Now, I have laid the whole year out just so you could get a sense of what this would look like, but really, it's pretty repetitive at this point. There's a few meetings with only one board meeting, like December. We only have one board meeting scheduled for December right now. But for the most part, this format is repeated over and over again. So with that, I really wanted to just give you the feel of what it would look like and then open it up for some conversation, because I think so much of our conversation around the committee structure has been very, very high level and a bit esoteric. So I thought really showing what a month would look like would help us open up the conversation a bit here. So happy to have some discussion with the board about what future committee of the whole meetings would look like with these 3 separate standalone committees meeting.
Thoughts? Yep, Mr. Rollins.
Just 2 things on the governance committee. One's just logistics. So you're scheduling these governance committee meetings on Thursdays. Do you have a time in mind? Because we're now talking about getting 4 board members in here. It sounds like at different times, but for that meeting. And some of us work, so like what time are you thinking about doing?
So I think we will have to work with the board. I think Mrs. Fromm will be tasked with reaching out and coming up with something that works for Mr. Scrivano as well as the individual board members, and we'll try to repeat that as much as possible.
The other thing that I just wanted to sort of raise, mostly with Ken, is so this is turning the governance committee into a prep session for the board meetings, but the governance committee does have its own sort of agenda and work plan. And,
yes.
And at some point, the governance committee itself is actually going to have to meet to act as the governance committee. So we'll have to make sure we don't lose sight of that.
Great point. I'll make sure I make note of that.
Yeah, I'll just kind of comment on that. I think that for those board, everybody else works. So, I mean, if we need a 15-minute window to meet with David, maybe Lori and I and Aaron can be here physically, and David could Zoom in for 15 minutes, and we do that, and then you wouldn't have to leave work or whatever. That same for Tim. We work around his work schedule and Jude's. That we kind of stagger it somehow so that Lori and Aaron and I are actually physically here, and then the 3 committee other chairs would Zoom in or call in or conference call or whatever, that kind of thing. So I'll be as flexible as whatever the needs of the chairs are. So. Comments or thoughts? Okay, so this will be an ongoing work in progress. Okay, we have no public speakers for tonight. And if there are no other comments, then we will, I think we're adjourning, aren't we? And then reconvening. Connor needs a few minutes, so let's say 6:15. I'll take a motion in a second to adjourn.
So moved.
6:30, okay. Okay. So I'll take a motion and a second to adjourn this meeting and reconvene at 6:30.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor.
Second.
Second by Mr. Rollins. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Thank you. This meeting is adjourned at 6:05 and will reconvene at 6:30.